Hello guys, it's Mike here, and we're going to be going over what types of champions thrive in tournament play. We're also going to be going over the different types of champions, the strengths and weaknesses of that type of champion, as well as what champions synergize with each other, and not least, my recommendations of what champions you should pick up depending on what role you want to play for your team. So first, let's go over assassins, and then next we're going to be going over bruisers and tanks, which fall under the fighter category, as well as we're going to be going over mages, and we're going to be probably going to be going over marksman. Sometimes it's called the AD carry or bot. For example, like a marksman can specifically just be like these range attack speed champion, auto based champion types. But for example, a lot of people play in the bot lane, Ziggs, Swain for bot laners. Next we're going to be going over supports, and after that we're going to be going over just the tanks down here. But most importantly, don't get too confused based off of how the client organizes the champions. Go based off of the descriptions that I'm giving you, because the client can be a little bit confusing. For example, for fighter, they have Taric in here, and Taric is more of like a support, right? And Thresh is in here as well. So this is just for client organizational purposes. Just go off of my descriptions of the champions. So assassins first are champions that have high DPS, they're highly mobile. Usually they have kits that are really good at hunting immobile squishy champions. A great assassin example is just Eve. Eve has a stealth, has a dash, has an execution. That's an assassin. So for example, Kali has multiple dashes, has stealth. Ari has multiple dashes, is very good at catching squishy AD carries or squishy supports. So these are assassins. I would consider Akshan more of a marksman. So these assassins are really strong when you see enemy team comps that are building around squishy marksmen, specifically like Caitlyn, or if you see like stationary mages like Lux or Xerath, assassins will counter them. So keep that in mind. That's the assassin's strength. Now, where assassins fall short, try to guess. It's very simple. Assassins want to kill someone really fast, but tanks just build a ton of health, mages, armor. They level up with a lot of peeling abilities as well. So for example, if you're playing against like a Malphite, you're not going to be able to one-shot a Malphite if he's building full tank, or even like an Ornn, and then you might feel like there's nobody to kill. So if you see a very heavy assassin team comp, add more bruisers, tanks, champions that can incorporate armor mages health in their build. That's how you counter assassins. Alright, my recommendations for assassins are generally going to be the assassins that are generally good in most situations in tournament play. If I'm not saying assassin that's like one of your favorites, it's probably just because that assassin might be too hard to learn for everybody. So let's go down the list of which assassins I recommend for tournament play. So specifically, I recommend Jax for tournament play, Gwen, LeBlanc. Even Nocturne is good because the paranoia allows you to very easily confuse the enemy team comps. Kiana, if you're a solid Kiana player, the ultimate is very strong for having like huge impact. Pantheon for sure, because if you want like an easier CC, like point and click, you can't really miss that. Specifically, Pantheon can be played in mid-top support. Jungle got nerfed, so you'd have to test out the clear and see how you do. Maybe it's good with the leash, but generally speaking, Pantheon isn't like super A tier, but it is a decent start as well. Silas, Riven if you're good at Silas, Riven if you're good at Riven, I mean. For example, Xin Zhao is more of a bruiser, but he kind of gets pretty close. He's pretty good at diving and he does a lot of damage. Now, I wouldn't recommend champions that are super selfish like Zed, because Zed is specifically a type of champion that offers no CC and needs a lot of resources in terms of like items to become strong. Whereas a good example is like Silas can do the same thing and Kiana can do the same thing, but they offer CC to the teammates and you don't need as many items to become as strong. Now, Diana is also a good assassin for tournament play because assassins that generally have good engage CC that allow your teammates to follow up or can cause disruption are better than assassins that just do pure damage when it comes to tournament play, because your goal is to combo with other players when you're playing in a fives tournament. This is also actually a really good assassin in tournament play for mid lane because the fish shark is a long range engage for jungle ganks, support ganks. Now, Irelia is very difficult. If you know Irelia well, I would recommend it. If not, then try something else. She has a lot of different combos. I would not recommend like selfish champions like Rengar. And I believe we will stop there after Yone. So Yone is also a good one, but just like Riven, you need to be well practiced because Yone actually does scale quite well. And we will cover these other classes next. So next on the list is covering bruisers. So this fighter category incorporates bruisers and tanks and sometimes like random supports. So just use this as like a reference. Don't use it as like, you know, solid. These guys are all fighters. Okay, so bruiser class. So bruiser class are champions that are strong at staying in the fight and have a solid base of damage, but also tankiness. Their strengths is that they can stay in the fight, they can either cause a lot of disruption, or they can be a decent frontline, or just be a really strong early game laner. Now, a lot of people get confused with bruisers and tanks. So tanks to me, and to most people in the league community, are just there to build armor, mages, and health, whereas fighters and bruisers can be more classified as champions that build mix. So if you see like Gore Drinker users with Steric's Gauge, you can kind of categorize them as a bruiser, whereas if you find Sunfire Cape users and, you know, Chemtake users into like Gargoyles or like Thornmail that only build armor, that their fundamental job is just to be tanky, those are tanks. So good examples of bruisers are going to be Aatrox, Camille, Darius, and then good examples of tanks are going to be Dr. Mundo, Malphite, Nasus, Nautilus, Poppy, Rammus, right? So that's how you classify them. Talk about weaknesses. So bruisers' weaknesses is that sometimes they get outscaled very easily. They get outscaled by tanks. They can get outscaled by like hyper carries, but usually the strength of bruisers are that they're very strong in the first like 10 to 15 minutes of the game. Now they're not as strong comparatively. Like in Aatrox, it's not going to have as much impact as like a 30-minute Nasus, right? Or 30-minute Malphite. but an Aatrox will have more impact than a 5-minute Nasus. Same thing with Darius. So my recommendations for tank players is that if you're happy with having a weak laning phase, if you're okay with your weakness is that you have to give up your early game playmaking, but then you become a monster in team fights in late game, that's a perfect playstyle for you. But if you are a top laner that wants to dive, wants to trade a ton, go the bruiser route, like Aatrox, Darius. Alright, let me give you guys recommendations on bruisers. So, for example, Aatrox is a really good bruiser. Darius is a good bruiser. I would not recommend Fiora because she's a selfish champion that kind of like destroys the purpose of being able to set up your teammates, joining up for team fighting. But this does not mean that you cannot play Fiora in team play. It just means that you have to be very skilled at it. For the average team top laner, I would stay away from champions like Fiora in the top lane. I would recommend other bruisers like Gnar. Gnar is kind of like a mixed, but especially his Mega Gnar form is really good for like causing a lot of disruption. Jax is pretty good as well. You just need time to scale. Now, Kled is also very strong because it's a very easy one-click button to engage. And let's see. So other bruisers could possibly be Set. Set I really recommend. Really good engage, solid frontline, solid disruption. Tryndamere is a bruiser, but he's more on the damage side. He's like more pure damage side. Tryndamere has been climbing in popularity because of recent buffs. By the time you see this video, there might be changes, so keep an eye out on that. Wukong, very good bruiser. Volibear, very good bruiser. Lots of disruption, strong early game. Wukong has decent scaling, and Volibear can build tank and cause a lot of disruption with the Q stun. Alright, now let's go over tanks that I recommend. So tanks that can just build pure armor matches and health, or sometimes they can build like some damage, but their main goal is to be super survivable, not deal maximum damage. Mundo is a good one. Specifically, Malphite is one that you guys heard for the longest time. Really good for team play if you are playing against a lot of AD champions because of the bonus armor. Mordekaiser, very solid one because you can do a decent amount of damage, but you're also a massive frontline tank. Nasus is not one that I would recommend, just generally because you're kind of leaving your team to 45 while you stack. Another one that I super recommend for team play is Ornn because it's good engage. Of course, you're not going to be amazing in laning because you're not going to be able to contest against like Darius or like Fiora, but there is good setup. So if you get jungle ganks, and later on you can give people items and you spike, and you're a super big tank with those item buffs. Poppy, good one that I recommend. Really good against engage dash type of team comps. And then, oh, I also forgot, Renekton is a really good bruiser. Renekton, really recommend Renekton because you can snowball really easily in lane. Set, I know that I mentioned him as a bruiser, but he can also be built as a tank, a pure tank as well. So there are specific champions that if you just change the build, then you can literally be a straight up like pure tank. There are also champions that fall under both classifications really easily. So Sion is a really good tank as well. For those that play TFT, he's like so tanky, but for those that don't, you can kind of imagine that you can just go straight tank with the W shield and you have a lot of disruption with your R engage. Now, when it comes to other champions in the top lane, you can go like very off meta picks, like for example like Zac top, Maokai top. These are good tanks as well. even champions like, let's see, I saw one of these days I did actually see like a Alistar top. There's also Cho'Gath as well. Cho'Gath is very good as a tank. Um, the Shen as well with the global is very strong in team play because you can specifically dash to a high volatile lane with a shield at any time after level 6 as long as it's not on cooldown. One weakness of these tanks is that if you do TP out of lane, you don't have a way to get back. If you're playing against like a Jace or a Fiora or someone that can kill towers very easily, you're going to lose your own tower, so you have to watch out for that weakness. Next thing, Tahm Kench, very strong tank as well because you have the E shield and one of the weaknesses of tanks is that they have very weak laning phase. But Tahm Kench actually doesn't have a weak laning phase, so definitely would recommend that as well. Okay, so those are just my recommendations for tanks. Now let's go over the mage class, and then we'll go over the bot lane role and the marksman class as well. So mage class, you can actually play mages in bot lane as well. LCS teams have proven that it works. You can do this specifically in tournament play and it will work as well. And the most important part about this is just having draft flexibility. So if like your mid laner wants to play like Lucian mid, or specifically like Jace mid, because they are very good at that champion, then a bot laner can play like Ziggs bottom. We're not going to cover that too much. That's just a good reference because it's probably like 5% of you guys watching this video will do this. So we're going to go over mages for mid lane specifically. So mages' strengths is that they do a ton of damage. Most of them will do a lot of burst damage. Some of them will do consistent. They can do a lot of AoE damage most of the time. Most of them that you see on this list will do a ton of AoE damage. Not only that, but you want to have balance between AP and AD. If one team is just stacking AD or magic resist, one team is stacking armor or magic resist, then your damage is going to be cut in half. That's why you need both. Not only that, but we also want to focus on just having one person that can do consistent damage and one person that can cause disruption with burst damage. Sometimes that mix is really strong. So, for example, Annie will do a ton of bursts and also set up CC to engage as well. Now let's talk about specifically the weaknesses of mages. Weakness in mages, usually they're very squishy. They're prone to dive. So keep that in mind when drafting. So mages that I would recommend for tournament play are Annie. Annie's very good at engaging and good at just starting a fight, doing a ton of damage. Very easy to play too. Anivia is very good if you're a good Anivia player. Same with Ahri, same with Azir. These champions are good if you have the expertise. Okay, so Cassiopeia, also one. Good if you have the expertise. Kassadin is very good if the enemy team comp is allowing you to scale. LeBlanc is very good specifically if you're playing against immobile squishies and you want to play with your jungler and set up CC for your jungler. Malzahar is very good if you're playing against a engaged mid laner that you can just easily shut down with the R button. Only good also if you won't just get run over in laning phase. Malzahar's weakness is that his laning phase can be a little bit weak since his spells are easy to dodge. Orianna is a solid pick always because she's well-rounded in decent mobility, CC, and consistent DPS. Rumble, I would recommend if you are good at Rumble. This specific champion is a good roam type champion that allows you to create a lot of chaos and damage in teamfights with the ultimate. Ryze is a really good scaler. Not as good early game, good roam type champion as well. Syndra and Sylas are super good solid picks. Specifically, Syndra is a staple There are tons of combos that allow you to one-shot other mid lane matchups. Sylas is specifically good if they have ultimates that you can steal from. Swain is good in the case that you want a beefier type of mid lane. You want to get away from like the standard I'm really squishy. TF is good if you have a lot of side laners that are the main carry and you're just trying to support them. Now, Veigar is good if you're scaling and they allow you to. Most of the time when it comes to mid lane, it's more about how good you are at showing a mid laner's strength, their champion strength, and a lot of mid laners are viable. For example, Vel'Koz is a very good long range mid laner. Weakness is that if an enemy gets on top of him, he doesn't have much peel. Victor is the same thing. Control base, you have a lot of zone control, you do a lot of damage. Now, Vladimir is good for dive team comps. Xerath and Zoe and Ziggs are great for poking. Specifically, just really good if the enemy team does not have any great way to get on top of you. Alright, now we want to go into the AD carries. This is going to be very important because AD carries specifically do a lot of your team's damage, and it's also one of the harder roles to play because specifically you have a ton of people trying to kill you, and not only that, but you're usually more immobile than mid laners. Okay, so strength of an AD carry, huge consistent damage. Once you get your item spike, you can solo carry fights. Weaknesses of an AD carry, you're usually immobile, you usually don't have much peel. So we want to focus on the champions that kind of get rid of that weakness, or that just have so much damage that it's worth playing. Let's start with the champions that get rid of this weakness, that make AD carry like more like fun to play and also more achievable to play. So for example, Ezreal is really good in tournament play because the ability to get rid of one weakness, which is the dash, so that you're not easily killed. Jhin is very good because you can assist fights from afar with your ulti and your W. You don't have to get close in invulnerable range. Specifically, like MF is also good because of that same reason with Jhin. Your E ultimate combo is pretty long range. Xayah is also good in tournament play because you have self peel, and Tristana is good because you also have the W jump to assist your team. Now let's also talk about the other type of AD carry, the one that does a ton of damage and specifically is really good if you have a support that will get rid of your weakness, which is, you know, being vulnerable to dives. So if you have a support that can peel for you, these champions are really good in tournament play because you can snowball through doing a ton of damage in hit. So for example, that would be Jinx, that would be Agma. MF is still considered one of those champions that will do a lot of high DPS, and Twitch can be considered one as well, but I wouldn't recommend Twitch as much for tournament play. And Vayne is really strong right now, but by the time you watch this, you might get nerfed, so keep an eye out. Sivir is also a really good one for tournament play, but you just need heal because you don't have any dashes, you only have spell shield, and you don't have much self peel. Okay, now let's talk about the AD carries that have assists when it comes to dive team comps. When it comes to early game team comps, these type of AD carries are very strong for early game opportunities because they have assist abilities that can allow your other laners to shine. So for example, if your team comp is based off of dive team comps where your solo laners are shining, you want to play these utility AD carries. Ashe with the ulti to CC. Varus with the ulti to CC and start fights. You can even do like Senna, but that's probably pretty old, where you would have like Senna AD carry and like a support that takes all the farm. That's an advanced strategy. If you know it, then you can try that out, but that's kind of an old strategy. But mainly like the Varus, the Ashe, are those go-to when it comes to setup AD carries. Alright guys, and then we're gonna go into supports. So let's talk about strengths and weakness for supports. So strengths of supports is that they usually can be very versatile. You can be utility based, or you can be disruption based, or you can be engage based. So weakness of supports depend on which type of support you play. For example, engage supports can get countered by disengaged supports. Poke supports can get countered by engaged supports. Disengaged supports can get countered by poke supports. So think about it that way. It makes a lot of sense if you visualize how each support matchup trades with each other in lane. For example, like a poke support wants to consistently poke, right? But they get countered if they just get dove on before they can even get long range poke in. Okay, so supports I would recommend are Alistar, Braum, Karma, Leona, Lulu, Morgana, Nami, Rakan, Soraka, Tarek, Thresh, Yuumi, Blitzcrank, and I believe that is it for those. I believe I also said Thresh already. But if I didn't, then Thresh is also a very strong support. So those are my recommendations for supports. My criteria for those support recommendations is because they are versatile, they offer a lot of disruption, or they offer a lot of peel, and generally they're trying to assist the team out with their abilities rather than focusing on themselves. So for example, you wouldn't want to play a support like Pyke, which is prioritizing, I'm the carry. As a support, you want to help your other champions that are more capable of carrying. For example, if you have like a super fed MF, you would want to peel for it or engage for it. Alright guys, so that was this video on what class of champions strive in tournament play. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you have any additional questions, reach out. I'm on the Discord server. Thank you guys for watching. Have a good one.